Now, in the first kind of bucket of applications that you mentioned, some of the like note taking and some of this things you can do on your own. How does your vision for that stuff relate to the personal server movement with Umbrel and Start9 and some of the things that they're working on?
Yeah, I've been in communication with those groups, and one of them was like, as soon as the stack is ready, we could potentially roll that out as an option. I think that's a perfect fit. I mean, that's where we want to see this stuff. Like let's get it into a Docker image, let's get it on those platforms, so that in their respective app stores, or whatever they use to be able to offer apps up to people, there can be these decentralized web platform enabled apps that people can install and immediately begin using. And so we want to make sure that the platform's tight, that people are able to develop on it very easily with APIs that make this stupid simple. And so that's our focus really for the next few months, is getting that into a state where it's very easy for users and developers in that indie community. And I think people will embrace it. I think they've been waiting for it. I mean, I think you've seen Jack talk about like how he laments parts of the internet and stuff like that. Just the centralization that's come to be, and platform, just kind of platforms choking out like different things. I mean, this is what we should have as the foundation. And I think it took going through the pain of the last, I don't know, better part of the last decade, and seeing it slowly become a problem that was at one point just technologists saw it. Like, I was concerned about it 10 years ago, and people would kind of, brush it off. Oh, that's not a big problem. And then you see it grow, and now these election cycles and these crazy events happen in the world, and now everyone's kind of intimately aware of it. So I think the timing is right, and I think we'll see a lot of uptake for that reason.
And so maybe the personal server movement, maybe this, it doesn't necessarily always have to live on like a home node. It can be one of those like outbound nodes that you described earlier, where it's like more high performance, but you still own the data as if it was sitting in your home right beside you.
You should always have a copy in your own devices. My belief is that your core data, be it for the apps or your identifying credentials or data, whatever it is, should always be replicated on one of your devices. Now, if you're like a movie buff and you're putting hundreds of terabytes out there, that you're going to have to find a way to like sync it or get extensions for storage. But I do believe that even if you're using one of those high availability nodes, just to take the brunt of the traffic from like people asking for, say, public data, like your tweets or something like that, you still want that stuff here. So it'd still be synced and backed up. And that gives you the ability to walk away at any time and kind of reinflate yourself anywhere across any number of these things, or self-host it at home on your own high availability node.
Mm-hmm. How do you think self-hosting, and this I'm more thinking of like the complex apps like the Twitters and maybe the Apple App Store and things like that. How do you think self-hosting changes the relationship that users have with companies building products? Like, how does it change my relationship with Apple if now all of a sudden I'm self-hosting my data, or my relationship with Twitter and Google? Like, Google's taking a 55% or 45% cut on YouTube videos. Facebook takes 100% cut on all the ads that they surface on the platform. How does that relationship change if now all of a sudden, hey, that data's mine? Actually, you can have it, but you can only rent it now.
Yeah, I think that it can't be understated, right? The enormity of that shift can't be understated. And how I would look at it is some organizations and models are hit harder than others, right? One of the reasons people ask, like, why would Microsoft get into this? Why would they do this, right? If you look at Microsoft's revenue streams, it's actually very diversified. Microsoft doesn't get a lot of money from like ads and data snooping. Like I mean, I'm not going to say they didn't do it at all, but like compared to like say the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, I mean, it's like a sliver. It's like almost nothing. Certainly not enough to build policy around, where like you're going to build your entire company on that model and like defend against things that would hurt. So maybe there's some paper cuts for organizations like that are not as heavily reliant on owning your identifiers and data as the person, right? Mm-hmm. Organizations that are almost solely built on that, I mean, life's going to change. Like if we were able to successfully do this as a community and people were to buy in and understand that this is the lifeline, this is the thing that they've actually been asking for, not people like Elizabeth Warren, let's tear down all these tech companies. We don't need to do destructive things. We can do constructive things, like put this platform in place and kind of force the conversation. At the point that it becomes prevalent, you can imagine that ad models change. Who holds the data? They're not scanning my grocery list anymore. I have that. They have to be a lot more equitable in terms of if they want to learn something about me, like ads could change to where if they want to learn something about you, they ask you. They say, hey, are you in the market for a car? Well, can you give me some preference data? Would you be willing to give that to me? Maybe they defray some of your costs for your high availability node that you're running out there so that you can tweet more, right? But you get to choose. You're in the driver's seat. They lose control and they don't own you as a person. And I think that's the point that we have to get to. And if we don't, I mean, I think we'll continue to see the growth of these massive walled gardens and platforms that ultimately will control everything we do. So the stakes couldn't be higher. And I think it underscores that there's really two things we have to win the war in this ecosystem. And that is money, and Bitcoin is doing that. And it's identity and all the app stuff that relates to it. And if you don't win both battles, you might just lose the war, because they're both highly interdictable points in people's lives.
That's fascinating. In your ad example, when you were talking about how a platform may have to ask you in the future if they can get access to some of your preference data, do you think that could also be paid? Do you think that's a use case where Lightning does fit in, or Bitcoin does fit in, and go, hey, all of a sudden Facebook, if you want access to all of this data, you can pay me a little bit. Send me a couple sats every now and then, and I'll give you access to it, and that'll be kind of the new relationship. Do you think that's reasonable?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if I was in the market for a car or something, right, of a certain kind, you type anything in vaguely related and you just see all these random like ads from all sorts of car companies. Most of the companies I wouldn't buy from. Most of the types of cars are wrong. They're going to give me like some 3-cylinder bucket or something. I'm like, dude, I'm not doing that. So, to be able to give someone a solid lead just from me is great, right? To be able to say like, yeah, I'm actually in the mood for a car. I wouldn't hate it if you like shilled me some of this SUV or some of, whatever your preference is, right?
Yeah.
The same cool thing happens with preferences. There's a little bit of a dynamic to it with these sort of like sites that provide like a rich experience, like say Netflix and Spotify, and even Tidal, where there's playlists, there's favorites, there's all this stuff, right? And that stuff could be gathered organically over time, but then other people might want to know that, right? Or maybe you want to walk over to a different service provider and you're like, I actually want to boot up with my personalized experience in play at once. Mm-hmm. It's not just ads. It's not just for like vampires out there wanting to give you a couple sats to like divulge yourself. It's also for you. Like if I don't like regurgitating playlists or anything musical across apps, right? Like I use Groove on Windows, and then on Android, there's a different app. And man, I hate the idea that I can't sync that. Be a heck of a lot better if those apps ask for access to a common source of data and could both party on it, right? Mm-hmm. As I change something on this device, it's reflected here. Like that should be the experience that comes with me, right? Wherever my digital self is portrayed. And that's just way better for consumers. I mean, that's sort of a more advanced world that we're going towards.
Right. So instead of siloed apps that are trying to guess your preferences, it can be instead a bunch of apps that can communicate with you, telling them what your preferences are, and giving them access to those preferences on a case-by-case basis.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And there's a question that comes up where people will generally ask, if they're astute, and it's like, well, why would someone want to do that? Why would Netflix want to put your data in this like common form that you could give access to some other app for? In some cases, the answer would be no. They would try to defend the gates, right? The moat. But I think this is sort of like, it's just, you always got to find Brutus, right? When you find these oligopolies of like, it's 5 companies, 7 companies, there's always like a clear winner or maybe 2, but then there's like these other few, and they could get stabby at any moment, right? Because they don't have all the customers. So if they're going to try and do something that's good for you as a person, they might use that as a differentiating factor. So they get together and they're like, yeah, this is the common data format. We're all going to put playlists like this, and then they can sort of chip away slowly at those incumbents. And so you always got to scan the Theatre de Pompey and wonder, who's my Brutus? Who are we going to partner up with? Who wants to take a stab at things? And I think that's how you can assault some of these large, platform walled garden type things. Is there's always someone willing to do it,